The spark of resistance. The silence of the command bridge was deafening. Captain Elena Rodriguez gripped the edge of her console, her dark eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed the impossible. Massive alien vessels hung in Earth's orbit like predatory sharks, their obsidian hulls absorbing and deflecting every scan and communication attempt. Humanity had always wondered if we were alone in the universe. Now they had their answer. And it was nothing like anyone had imagined. The Krell were not interested in communication. They were here to consume. Status report, Elena commanded, her voice steady despite the tension that coiled through her body. Lieutenant Omar Reyes, her tactical officer, looked up from his console, his face pale but determined. 17 major population centers have gone dark, he reported. Satellite communications are intermittent. The first wave of their landing craft are entering the atmosphere over Southeast Asia and Eastern Europe. Elena's mind raced. The UN Space Fleet had been reduced to a skeleton force after years of budget cuts and political infighting. They were woefully unprepared for a full-scale invasion. The Krell's technology made human weapons look like primitive toys. A sudden burst of static crackled across the communication channels. Then a voice, harsh, guttural, but unmistakably translated. Inhabitants of Earth, your civilization is inefficient. Your resources will be harvested. Resistance is mathematically improbable. The arrogance of the statement would have made Elena laugh if the situation weren't so dire. Inefficient. Improbable. Humans had a long history of defying mathematical probabilities. Omar, patch me through to Global Defense Command, she ordered, and get me a direct line to the UN Emergency Council. The next few hours were a blur of frantic preparations. Military bases worldwide were mobilizing. Civilian evacuation protocols, long considered theoretical exercises, were now being implemented in deadly earnest. Elena knew their first response would be crucial. The Krell had chosen their invasion sites carefully. Regions with critical infrastructure, resource-rich territories, strategic military locations. They weren't just conquering. They were systematically dismantling humanity's ability to resist. But they had made one critical miscalculation. They had underestimated human resilience. In underground research facilities, in makeshift command centers, in hastily converted industrial complexes, humanity was already adapting. Engineers were reverse engineering the first pieces of captured Krell technology. Quantum physicists were developing new defensive algorithms. Military strategists were drawing up unconventional warfare plans. The Krell saw humans as a resource to be harvested. They saw a species to be categorized, controlled, consumed. They did not see the fire that burned in every human heart. The refusal to submit, the instinct to fight, to survive, to overcome. As the first Krell landing ships touched down in the rice fields of Vietnam, as their massive war machines began to systematically destroy communication towers and military installations, something was happening. Something the invaders could not comprehend. Humanity was uniting. Elena watched the initial reports stream in. Military units from countries that had been traditional rivals were now coordinating with unprecedented speed. Civilian networks were sharing intelligence, creating distributed communication systems that the Krell couldn't easily disrupt. They think we're weak, she muttered to herself. They have no idea what we're capable of. The first true test was about to begin, and humanity would show the universe exactly what it meant to be underestimated. The spark of resistance had been lit, and soon it would become an inferno. Technological breakthrough. The underground research facility hummed with an electric intensity that had nothing to do with its advanced power systems. Dr. Marcus Way stared at the holographic display, his fingers moving with a musician's precision across the quantum interface. Around him, a team of the world's most brilliant minds worked in a controlled frenzy, their previous academic rivalries forgotten in the face of humanity's existential threat. "We're missing something," Marcus muttered, pushing his wire-rimmed glasses up his nose. The captured fragment of Krell technology pulsed with an alien energy that defied conventional physics. Every analysis, every test, Every simulation had only revealed how little they truly understood. Dr. Fatima Okonkwo, a quantum computing expert, approached with a steaming mug of coffee. "You haven't slept in 72 hours, she said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of fact. Marcus barely heard her. His mind was racing through probability matrices, quantum entanglement models, and neural network simulations. The Krell's technological superiority wasn't just about advanced hardware. It was something more fundamental, a way of processing information that human technology couldn't yet comprehend. A massive screen displayed the ongoing global conflict. Krell war machines moved with terrifying efficiency, destroying military installations, communication networks, and civilian infrastructure. Humanity was being pushed back, systematically dismantled by an enemy that saw them as nothing more than a resource to be harvested. But resources, Marcus knew, could be unpredictable. The breakthrough came not with a eureka moment, but with a subtle shift in perspective. Marcus had been approaching the Krell technology as a static system, something to be analyzed, categorized, understood. But what if it was more dynamic? What if the technology itself was a living, adaptive system? "Fatima," he called out, "run a quantum resonance scan. But this time, treat the sample as a living organism, not a machine. An organism." The team exchanged glances. This was the kind of unconventional thinking that had made Marcus both brilliant and controversial in scientific circles. Before the invasion, such an approach would have been dismissed as academic heresy. Now it might be humanity's last hope. The scan began, quantum probes delicately interfacing with the Krell technology. At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the holographic display began to shift. Patterns emerged, not static blueprints, but dynamic fluid systems that responded to the quantum probes like a living organism reacting to stimuli. "My God," Fatima whispered. The Krell's technological superiority wasn't about more advanced circuits or more powerful energy systems. It was about adaptability. Their technology didn't just process information, it learned, it evolved, it responded. Marcus's mind raced. If human technology could be made to adapt in the same way, to learn, to evolve in real time, they might stand a chance. "We need to redesign our entire technological approach," he said, his voice gaining strength. "Not just our weapons, everything. Communication systems, defensive networks, computational models, they all need to become living, adaptive systems." Outside the underground facility, the world was burning. Krell ships continued their systematic destruction. But in this moment, in this hidden laboratory, something extraordinary was happening. Humanity was learning how to fight back. Not with brute force, not with overwhelming technology, but with the one thing the Krell could never understand: adaptability, creativity, the ability to transform in the face of impossible odds. The first prototype of what would become known as the Adaptive Defense Network began to take shape, a technological immune system for an entire planet. The war for Earth's survival had entered a new phase. The first stand. The orbital defense platform shuddered under the relentless Krell assault. Lieutenant Jamal Kingston gripped the targeting controls, his dark eyes narrowed with concentration. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands remained steady. Adaptive Defense Network is at 47% integration, called out Specialist Rita Gonzalez from her station. "We're not fully online yet." Around them, the platform was a symphony of controlled chaos. Alarms blared. Holographic displays flickered with incoming Krell attack vectors. The station, humanity's first real line of defense, was all that stood between the alien invasion force and the vulnerable populations below. Jamal had trained for this his entire career, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of facing an enemy so technologically advanced. The Krell ships moved like living things, their obsidian hulls shifting and adapting with each defensive maneuver humanity attempted. "Enemy ships approaching Quadrant 3, announced Technical Sergeant Ahmed Rahman. 16 primary vessels, 32 support craft." 16 against one orbital platform. The odds were impossible, which meant they were perfect for humans to defy. Jamal remembered Dr. Wei's briefing from the previous week. The new adaptive defense network wasn't about matching Krell technology. It was about understanding it, predicting it, and then subverting it in ways the aliens could never anticipate. Gonzalez, activate the quantum interference protocol, Jamal commanded. It was an experimental system, barely tested, barely understood. But they were out of conventional options. Rita's fingers danced across her console. Quantum interference activated, generating adaptive response matrices. The first wave of Krell ships opened fire. Energy weapons that could vaporize entire cities lanced toward the orbital platform. But something different happened this time. Instead of simply trying to block the attack, the platform's defensive systems began to shift. Quantum-entangled shields morphed, creating interference patterns that didn't just deflect the Krell weapons, they partially absorbed and redirected them. Weapon energy being redistributed, Und reported, his voice a mix of disbelief and excitement. We're turning their own attack against them. The Krell ships hesitated. For the first time since the invasion began, the alien vessels showed something resembling confusion. Their perfect, calculated attack had been disrupted by a strategy they couldn't immediately comprehend. Jamal allowed himself the briefest moment of satisfaction. Humanity had always been strongest when backed into a corner, when told something was impossible. Full spread of quantum adaptive missiles, he ordered. Target their primary command vessels. The missiles were nothing like traditional weapons. Developed in the underground labs by scientists like Dr. Wei, they were living systems. Each missile could adapt its trajectory, its attack vector, its very molecular structure in real time. They launched. The space between the orbital platform and the Krell fleet became a canvas of impossible maneuvers. Missiles twisted, turned, merged, and separated. They weren't just seeking targets. They were learning, evolving with each microsecond of flight. 3 Krell command vessels exploded, then 5, then 8. We're breaking their formation, Rita shouted, but Jamal knew the battle was far from over. The Krell would adapt. They always adapted. This was just the first round in what would be a long, brutal war, a war humanity intended to win. As the last of the initial Krell wave disintegrated, Jamal looked at his team. They were exhausted, wounded, but unbroken. Damage report, he said. Und looked up, a rare smile crossing his face. Minimal, Lieutenant. We actually did it. The orbital platform, humanity's first real stand against the invasion, had held. More importantly, they had shown the Krell something fundamental. Humans were not a resource to be harvested. They were a force to be reckoned with. Guerrilla warfare. The ruins of Warsaw smoldered under a moonless sky. Sergeant Natalia Volkov crouched behind a fractured concrete wall, her eyes scanning the occupation zone through a quantum-adaptive optics system. The Krell had transformed entire city blocks into processing centers, massive structures that absorbed and converted human resources with mechanical precision. But they hadn't counted on the human spirit. Echo Team. Report. She whispered into her encrypted communication device. The response came back in a series of coded clicks. All units operational, resistance cells in position. Natalia represented something the Krell could never understand. Hope. Not the naive hope of surrender, but the fierce, burning hope that comes from knowing defeat is not an option. The global resistance was unlike any military operation in human history. It wasn't a traditional army. It was a living network, cells of fighters, scientists, civilians, all connected through adaptive communication systems developed by teams like Dr. Wei's. Each group learned from the others, sharing intelligence, tactics, and most importantly, survival strategies. A distant rumble signaled the approach of Krell patrol units. Massive biomechanical walkers that moved like nightmarish spiders, scanning the devastated urban landscape for any sign of human resistance. Firefly Team, Natalia vocalized. Activate urban camouflage protocol. Across the city, hidden resistance fighters engaged their quantum-adaptive camouflage. Buildings themselves seemed to shift and blend, creating impossible geometries that confused Krell sensors. It was more than technology. It was a dance of human creativity against alien precision. The first Krell walker stepped into view. 15 meters of living metal, its sensory arrays probing the environment with cold, calculated efficiency. Under normal circumstances, it would have detected any human presence within milliseconds. But these were not normal circumstances. A young resistance fighter named Ego, barely 20 years old, had been developing an adaptive interference algorithm. Working from a makeshift lab in the city's underground tunnels, he had created something unprecedented, a way to make human presence essentially invisible to Krell sensors. The walker passed within meters of Natalia's position. Nothing. No detection. No alarm. "Wolverine team," she commanded, "prepare for resource disruption." Across the occupied zones, resistance cells struck simultaneously. Not with conventional weapons, but with targeted disruptions. Power systems mysteriously failed. Communication networks fragmented. Supply lines vanished like mist. The Krell were discovering something fundamental about humanity. We did not fight like machines. We fought like something entirely unpredictable. A communication burst came through her quantum-encrypted channel. Dr. Wei's team had another breakthrough, a way to use the Krell's own adaptive technology against them. Each attack, each interaction, was teaching humanity how to fight more effectively. The Krell saw humans as a resource, a problem to be solved. Natalia saw something else entirely. The global organism of resistance. Every lost battle was a lesson. Every fallen fighter was a source of new strategy. As dawn broke over the ruined cityscape, the Krell walkers began to withdraw. Something was wrong with their systems, something they couldn't immediately diagnose or correct. Natalia allowed herself the briefest smile. They were learning, adapting, fighting back. The guerrilla war for Earth had begun in earnest. The turning point. The mountain fortress was humanity's last hope. Carved deep into the ends, it represented more than just a military installation. It was a testament to human determination, a final sanctuary where the best and brightest of Earth had gathered to make their ultimate stand. Captain Elena Rodriguez stood at the central command hub, surrounded by a team that represented humanity's last chance. Dr. Marcus Wei's adaptive technology systems hummed with potential. Lieutenant Jamal Kingston's orbital defense strategies were integrated into every defensive protocol. Sergeant Natalia Volkov's guerrilla warfare intelligence formed the backbone of their unconventional approach. The Krell were coming, not with a single fleet, not with a conventional invasion force, but with everything they had. "Incoming transmission," announced Communications Officer Ravi Patil. "It's different." The holographic display flickered to life. Instead of the usual cold, calculated Krell communication, something unprecedented appeared. The transmission was a complex mathematical language, but one that showed signs of frustration, of confusion. Humanity had done the impossible. We had not just resisted. We had begun to understand. Dr. Wei stepped forward, his fingers dancing across a quantum interface. "They're trying to comprehend how we've survived," he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. "Our adaptive capabilities have become something they can't categorize." The mountain fortress was more than a military installation. It was a living organism of human innovation. Every system was interconnected, adaptive, able to learn and respond in microseconds. The lessons learned from orbital battles, from guerrilla warfare, from scientific breakthroughs, all converged here. "Final defense systems online," Jamal reported. His fingers moved with surgical precision, integrating the last pieces of their adaptive defense network. Natalia approached the central display, her eyes hard. "They'll concentrate everything on this location," she warned. "This is their attempt to crush our final resistance." Elena nodded. "That's exactly what we want them to do." The first wave of Krell ships breached the atmosphere. Thousands of vessels, each capable of destroying entire cities, converged on the mountain fortress. To the Krell, this was a mathematical certainty. Total destruction was inevitable. But mathematics had never understood human spirit. The battle was unlike anything in human history. Adaptive defense systems transformed. Quantum interfaced weapons became living things, learning and evolving with each microsecond of conflict. The mountain itself seemed to fight back, with integrated systems that could reconfigure faster than the Krell could comprehend. "We're not just defending," Dr. Wei shouted over the chaos. "We're teaching." Each Krell attack was met not with simple resistance, but with a response that demonstrated something fundamental. Humanity was not a static resource. We were a dynamic, learning, evolving species. Hours passed. Days seemed to compress into moments. The Krell fleet, which had conquered countless civilizations, found itself locked in a conflict it could not understand. Then something extraordinary happened. The Krell vessels began to retreat. Not all at once. Not in a coordinated withdrawal, but in a way that suggested something deeper, something the human team realized was unprecedented. The Krell were learning, and in learning, they were reconsidering. "They're analyzing us," Marcus said, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and profound realization. Not as a threat to be eliminated, but as a phenomenon to be understood. As the last Krell ships vanished from Earth's orbit, a profound silence fell over the mountain fortress. They had not just survived. They had transformed the very concept of conflict. Humanity had shown the universe that strength was not about overwhelming force. It was about the ability to adapt, to learn, to grow. The invasion was over. But humanity's real journey was just beginning.